College Football Update with your host, Sean Spencer and Alex Loosemore.
Yo, but look, let's get into it. College football storylines. Alex, there's a lot of stuff going on, and we're going to obviously talk about a lot of it. But we want to touch on something we've been talking about a lot this year. Colorado. Alex, We've seen how they've done. They surprised a lot of people with that 3-0 start, but we always knew the other shoe was going to fall. And last 2 weeks, it's gotten better, but still back-to-back losses. Where do they go from here?
I mean, for me, this goes right into the path that I expected for them because, I mean, I was one of the people that was surprised they kept it that close with USC. I know it got ugly early, but for them to bounce back and have that being a one-score game at the end, that is major props to them. Hats off to Dion for what he's doing with those guys. But, I mean, you look at the schedule the rest of the way. Who do they play? They got Arizona State this week. That's a get-right game. Mm-hmm. Then you host Stanford. Then you have a bye before going to UCLA, which is going to be a tough game.
Oh, yeah.
That's one where it's kind of like who's just outside that top 5, maybe 6 in the Pac-12 right now, with USC, Oregon, Washington, Utah, Oregon State, and now Washington State. Mm-hmm. Who's kind of that next one?
Oh, yeah.
It's those two teams up for debate right now, so that's going to be a really fun game. Then after that, they host Oregon State. That is a tough game. That's 2 tough games back-to-back before hosting Arizona, going to Washington State, and then to Utah to end the year. So a tough 2-game slide, kind of easy couple games, then tough 2-game slide, then an easy year game, and then a tough 2-game slide. So they'll be right around that 6, 7, maybe 8 wins if one of those extra games goes their way. Yeah. But it's right around that bowl eligibility borderline that we said at the beginning of the year. It's just they've looked really impressive in the games outside of Oregon.
Yeah, and the thing about it is, and going back to this one, like we got to give them credit because, like you said, when I saw the score start going up, and all of a sudden it's 21. And USC is just balling out. And I'm like, oh, here we go again. But I got to give it to Colorado. I got to give it to Shedeur Sanders. Those guys never quit. They never quit. Double digits in the second, third, and fourth quarter to the point where at the end of the game, Alex, I mean, I was thinking, maybe is this Colorado State all over again? Are we going to see some magic? Because
I was too.
Just like Alex said, that Swiss cheese defense.
Like we said going into the game, was if they can figure out how to control USC's defensive line, because they don't blitz often, but they get the most pressure with just their down linemen in the nation. They're number 1 at that. So we said going in, if they can control that defensive line or kind of limit that pressure on Shedeur, they're going to have a chance, and they struggled with that early. But then you could see that offensive line kind of started to get into a rhythm once they started to be able to run the ball a bit more. Then USC couldn't pin their ears back as much. And then Shedeur got comfortable. He got rolling. The receivers had the short catches, long gains. They really went into that catch and run attack, and it really worked for them.
Yeah. And look, at the end of the day, they show me that resilience. They figured out a way to get it done. They kept themselves in this ball game. And if anything, this is definitely going to give them that confidence going forward. We have to remember Travis didn't play this game.
No, he still didn't play.
Yeah. So we have to remember that this is a top-tier offense without their and Colorado didn't have their best guy. So once they get him back, obviously you're going to still have to get him back up to game speed. But that talent, and his football IQ will have him settle in fairly quickly, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So we will definitely. Ben said Colorado will end up 7-5 or 6-6 at worst.
Yeah.
It will beat both Arizona teams and Stanford for sure. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So then I guess that goes back to the question I asked before the season, Alex. We did not expect them to have the start that they did. These last two games we did expect. If he gets them to a 7-5 or shoot, even maybe a potentially 8-4, shock somebody, do we maybe push for him to get in that coach of the year conversation?
Oh, I think he'll absolutely be in that conversation. You make an argument for him to be a finalist.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily like the idea of rewarding somebody coach of the year for like barely over 500 when you look at it that way. But I mean, when you also look at what the turnover has been from 1-11 to this, and to go essentially almost beat USC, to beat the runner-up from last year's national championship game.
Yes.
To go beat Nebraska. There's some tough game. Well, there's some games that we didn't expect to go their way. That went their way, or just about went their way, that I think could work in his favor. Plus the popularity behind him and everything with that.
That's the other part. They're going to give him a push because it's prime time. You know what I mean? So, yeah. And shout out to him. Good for him. He's got those boys playing, and we're going to see down the line. Let's see what happens, man. See if they can shock the world. Colin says, just goes to show that they don't need all that extra. Just play like they know they can. Leave out the stuff for the cameras. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Look, we saw what happened when they were talking to smack and stomping on the O at Oregon. A real team took it personal, and we see. What do you say? Cameras have already been there. Right. We don't need all that extra attention. We don't need it. Yo, so let's move on. I see Alec here in the comments. And hey, Alex is one of the people that brought this up on Saturday. We want to know, there is a number of teams that are still undefeated. Most teams have played 5 games. Some have just played 4. And a number of these teams are undefeated. We want to know which team is a fraud and who is for real. I sent a list to Alex before the show. I'm going to list off some of the ones that are less known. Marshall is 4-0. JMU undefeated at 5-0. Liberty is 4-0. Fresno State, Air Force, Maryland, Louisville, and Missouri all are 5-0. Then you start coming into that higher into the top 25 with UNC, Kentucky, Washington State, Florida State, Penn State, and Miami. Then obviously higher than top 10, USC, Oklahoma, Washington, Oregon, Georgia, Texas, Michigan, and Ohio State. First, let's start with those teams that are in the top 25. How many of them are for real, and how many of them are a product of maybe the conference?
The ones outside?
Yeah, outside.
Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll go with, to me, I mean, we talked about this a little bit last week. The schedule Louisville's had, I don't. Yeah. They're not a real undefeated team. And it's tough to say, like, Liberty, Marshall, JMU, some of those teams, we've seen them play high-level football, but we haven't necessarily seen it against high-level competition.
Yes.
So I think for those teams, once they get deeper into conference play, like for Marshall, JMU, those teams, when the Sun Belt has some really good football. So I think once they get deeper into that conference schedule, we'll be able to see more who's real and who's not there. I think Fresno State's legit. I really do. They went to Purdue, beat them. I think they're legit. Air Force, it's hard to say. Maryland, I mean, I've been pretty clear all off season going into the season how I feel about Maryland. They are legit, in my opinion. Missouri's showing they're legit. They've handled their business. They played very well. They to me, they are absolutely legit.
Yeah, and honestly, I'm looking at it. Air Force, I want to go back to them because they have actually been blowing out some of these teams. We know San Jose State, they're only has one win, but they were able to put up 45 on them. And then San Diego State, they put 49 on them, and we saw what that defense can do when it gets clicking.
Yeah.
So I'm very impressed by that, but I do want you to watch Air Force because they are going to be playing Wyoming this coming week, and Wyoming only has that one loss to Texas, and they went toe-to-toe with Texas all the way throughout that game. So, yeah, I'm with you on most of that. JMU definitely have a soft spot for them because they're only 2 hours away from me. And shoot, so is Liberty. To see both those teams be undefeated, they've been able to play. The last couple of years, we've seen what they do. Missouri, that's one that I'm 100% behind. I'm hoping they can keep it going through the SEC, through that tough schedule. But you got a guy in quarterback is Brady Cook that is starting to find himself. He has his major weapon in Luther Burden. That team, and I know our guy Scott's gonna be excited to hear this, but I'm serious, man. That Missouri, there's a team that some of these SEC teams need to watch out for, man, because they play good football.
Absolutely.
Yeah, buddy. So let's keep going down the list. We talked about, at the Missouri. Let's go down. We have my team, North Carolina. We have Kentucky. That's got a major game coming up this week. Washington State got the upset over Oregon State. And Cam Ward, man, we need to start paying attention to that. No interceptions, 13 picks over 1,400 yards. This guy is the truth.
Yeah, he is the main reason they're undefeated and the main reason they're legit. I'm thoroughly impressed by them this year. And let's see how long they can keep it up.
Yeah. Let's see if they can keep this thing going. But as we get closer down into this top 25, I see what Misador said in there. So let's start talking about some of these teams.
Yeah.
Let's talk about you guys, Georgia. Let's talk about some of these teams that might have had an easier schedule early, but they're still for real, right?
See, our schedule is extremely backloaded. Our last 3 weeks are at Penn State. I believe we go to Maryland, and then we host Ohio State. Yeah. And there's no bye week in there. That's back to back to back. So, yes, our schedule, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Our schedule was so easy to start. But, I mean, there aren't many teams that I would put above us right now just on our depth and how we match up with most teams in the country.
Yeah. And look, hell no. All right.
Misador, show me.
You also,
if he can show me a 3-game stretch tougher than that 3-game stretch I just listed, then I'll have this discussion with him.
Now we'll
Balls
show
in your court,
respect.
Misador.
All right, we'll show you respect at Florida State. We know you were able to get Clemson, although we all know Clemson was struggling this year. Boston College gave you everything you can handle. You smoked Southern Miss, and LSU. We know what they're supposed to be, but let's be honest, they haven't necessarily lived up. Yeah, so you got those 4 wins, but what are we talking about now? Come on.
We'll have to wait and see. I'm thinking we'll win all 3, but if we lose one, I'd pin it on the Penn State game.
Now let's go right into this because this is Colin talking about is that weaker than Georgia. Hey, UT Martin, we've seen that. Ball State, we've seen this. They had trouble against South Carolina. This past week, Auburn, Peyton Thornton played the game of his life. Never seen him play that well in my I've never seen him play that well. Yeah. I watched a lot of him. So do we give them – I mean, it's the same thing, right? I mean, they've had 2 actually tough games that they've managed to get the W in, but at the same time, they were sweating. I know they were sweating.
Yeah. Now, if you're saying the weaker than UGA one, our schedule so far has been weaker than theirs, but our end's tougher than theirs. The Auburn and the South Carolina game, saw Misador do his comment there. I don't know that he'd want to jump to that, but we'll see.
That's rough.
Yeah, but I think part of it too is like we've said the last couple weeks, when you're the top dog, when you're the top team, every team is coming at you with their best shot.
Right.
So it's tough to say because Georgia's a much better team than either of those two teams, but they didn't play like it. I don't know if they were overlooking them or if it's just they're not fully comfortable with the offense yet or enough players aren't confident in their roles yet. I don't know what the situation is, but they're going to trip up if they keep this up. If Milton and Tennessee play as well as they did this past week, they could catch them. Missouri could catch them. Whoever comes out of that SEC West right now could catch them.
Look, and to be quite honest, I don't think we got to go much farther than this week right here. Kentucky can catch them. You know, Leary hasn't been the strongest, but we saw what Ray Davis did in that last game, putting up over 200 yards. So, you know,
he was
if you can hold right, if you can keep that offense off the field, keep Georgia's offense off the field, and have a steady running game, watch out, man. Watch out.
Yep.
So it's all doable. It's all doable. Yeah. So look. So there again, like we said, there are a number of teams. Let's look real quick into the Pac-12. You got Oregon, you got Washington, USC, Washington State. Those four are still undefeated. Who lasts longer as an undefeated team?
When do Washington and Oregon play? Because that'll change my answer. To me, those are. I know USC is undefeated and everything. Oregon and Washington are far and away the two best teams in this conference right now. Those two are so impressive. They're so well-rounded, what they can do offensively and defensively, and they can beat you with the run and the pass. Oh yeah. Of course. Oregon and Washington play next week. Yeah.
Yep.
But also USC plays Notre Dame.
Ooh. Okay.
I think Washington State and whoever wins that Oregon-Washington game will be the last two teams undefeated in the Pac-12. And then Washington State plays Oregon the next week. So by week 8, we could be down to one undefeated team in the Pac-12. My pick right now is Washington. To me,
Washington lasting the longest.
That's the scariest team in the country right now.
Yep.
That passing attack, Braylon Trice, a physical defense, and Michael Penix is probably playing better football than any quarterback in the country right now.
Yeah, he's putting up big numbers. So, hey, I like that pick. I'm partial to Washington State. They might not have all the extra pieces, but that passing attack by Cameron Ward is looking elite right now, and I'm loving it. But again, they're going to have to, in 3 weeks, they are going to be one of the teams, I guess, that's play Oregon. And obviously, they got Washington down the line. So it's going to be some tests they're going to have to face, but we'll see. Yeah, buddy.